What's up, guys? Ian here with some more Google Sheets for Beginners. This is episode 2, Formatting for Beginners. Just thought that this would be a nice follow-up to creating a doc. Hopefully you guys have come here from the first episode. If you haven't, then you're not missing much if you've used the program before. It was a very basic episode on how to create a doc and sort of what the doc looks like, and basically how to move around within the doc as well. So, this episode, we're going to start by adjusting the sizes of cells. In the last episode, we had talked about an example that I brought up, which I'll just retype again. The cat jumped over the dog, and we had talked about how the text is really situated in cell A, but it jumps over into cell B as well. So you can extend a cell to take all of that just by hovering over the little border here between the cells. You can see my cursor changes right there into two arrows going different directions, and you can click and you have to hold down with your left click and you can drag backwards. So let's just say we want to cut it in half, cut the cell in half. Right in the middle will be A, and so now the cell is half, and you can tell by the borders that these cells are um, all not that long. You can actually just click on the A column and it'll highlight all of them as well. And you can click on the one column and the one row and it'll highlight all of those as well. But now it's going over into cell C for some reason. Well, that's because we shrunk cell A. So we can just expand cell A again into where it should be. That's maybe a little bit longer. And we'll just expand cell A over to the end of the sentence there. And so now it's not jumping over into another cell. However, all of the cell A's from here on out will be extended. There's a way to get around that, and we will cover that in a further episode down the line here. But that's kind of just what I wanted to talk about, adjusting the size of cells. You can do the same thing with rows. You can click and drag to make a row thicker. So now this whole row is very thick. The cat jumped over the dog is now a large sentence, and it's sort of, you can just keep going with one, keep going with A, all of that good stuff. And I'm just going to take that away for now. There we go. So now we're back to where we started with the cat jumped over the dog. If you did not know, there is an undo feature. If you are on a PC, you can hit Control Z. If you're on a Mac, you can hit the Command button, which is either, they might have changed it now. It used to be the Apple key, but now there's like a weird symbol for it. It kind of looks like a P with another P with another P with another P, like four Ps like put together almost. Should be next to your spacebar if you're on a Mac. And it's that plus Z is undo. And there's another one for redo, which I can't remember off the top of my head. Control Y. The commands are right here, and you can also just take them from the edit bar. Same with copying and pasting. I didn't necessarily want to go over this, but I will anyways. You can hover over a cell, you can copy it with Control C, and then when you click off, you'll see which cell was copied, and you can paste anywhere else, and that's the same thing. And you can just undo that. You can also cut with Control X, which is the same thing. It copies it, and then when you paste it, it disappears from over there, and it moves to where you put it. That's what cut does. Those are just some basic commands that don't really have much to do with Google Sheets. They do in a sense because you will probably be using them as tools, but they're more of just general computer knowledge, and so I didn't really want to go over them too much. Now, you can also add rows and columns. So if we highlight column B here, we can go to insert one left, insert one right. So we'll just do one of both, insert one left. Column C will insert one right. And now if we scroll over, Google Sheets normally goes from A to Z, and then you have to keep adding from there. So the rows or the columns is the easiest way to see this. And you'll notice that it goes to AA and AB, which is the next row. You can keep going down quite a ways. Google Sheets does have, what is it, a 2 million cell limit or something for each spreadsheet. So even if you were, well, that's something that I might get into a little bit here actually. A little bit later on, we'll talk about that. Let me just make a note for myself really quickly here. Nice. Okay. Yes, so we've created AA and AB, and now we can delete those as well. Delete the column and it's gone. Delete the column and it's gone. So that's kind of cool. That's kind of what's going on there. You can do the same thing with rows. I don't really want to demonstrate it because the rows go down a hell of a long way. As you can see by how tiny this bar is, we can just scroll down to the bottom and it goes down to 1,000. Actually, I can just demonstrate here. You can choose to add 1,000 more rows. If you just click the add button here, it'll automatically just add 1,000 more rows. You can change it to whatever number you want. So let's say add 1 row to the bottom, and it'll add 1 row to the bottom. You see it went from 1,000 to 1,001, and we can just delete that row. Same thing as being able to right click on row 1,000, and we can insert one below. Same thing happens, just a little bit worse. So this command here is better for doing mass row adding, is usually very helpful with this. Like if we wanted to add 200, then now we're suddenly at 1,200, right? So that's kind of what's happening there. I'm just gonna actually, yeah, Control Z out of there and scroll all the way back up to the cat jumped over the dog. Next up is going to be filling cells with color. So if you didn't know, these cells do not have to be white. There's actually a little paint here, and it's called fill color, and you can select from a wide variety of colors that they have going on here. So let's make this a nice deep red, and that cell is nice and red now. We can make this cell aquamarine, this cell green, and so on and so forth. You can highlight a bunch of cells. I didn't really talk about this in the last episode, but you can highlight multiple cells and make them the same color as well. Make them all blue, dark blue. So now all those cells are dark blue. We can highlight a large group of cells and make them all orange, and that just overwrites what color you had them before. And that's kind of what coloring cells is mostly about. We'll get into this a little bit later in the more advanced section to do with coloring and all that stuff. Very important to do with there. You can also change the color of your text. So the cat jumped over the dog. We'll just highlight this. You can highlight from the formula bar, or you can highlight by double clicking and then highlighting that like that. This A with the color, you can change the text color. So let's make it easy-ish to read in purple, nice and dark purple, nice wonderful color. In the formula bar, it won't show up differently because the formula bar will always be black and white. But for anyone viewing the document, they can now see it in purple. And you can see that it's changed here. The B1 is now in black and not in purple, but we can make it purple, and we can start typing "you like Google Sheets," and so now that's in purple. Now this is something that I didn't talk about in the introductory video, but if you do type in B1 while the text from A1 moves into B1, it will just cut off the text from A1. You can still see it. Don't worry, it did not disappear. You can still see it. It's just cut off. You can either extend cell A to be able to see it like that, or you can manually move cell B to be able to see it. And so now your text moved from B1 to C1. And that's kind of, you can do that as well. So we're just going to leave this nice and purple for now. I don't see a reason not to. Next up, we're going to talk about some basic formatting that you may or may not have seen in things like Microsoft Word. You can change the style, the font of your text. We're working with Arial. It's a very basic font. It looks kind of nice. Comic Sans is one that people don't generally like. I kind of hate it for the purposes of Google Docs as well. There's not a huge list in Google Sheets. Google doesn't have the most fonts. You can purchase a lot of fonts through More Fonts, and they have a lot of custom ones that you can go through as well. You can search for your favorite font, all that good stuff. But for now, we're just going to go back to Arial. And yeah, so let's start with these three options right here. You can also change the size of your fonts. Again, this is very basic stuff that I don't really want to cover in a course on Google Sheets, but more of a course on computers in general. But we'll talk about these three here. So you can make your sentence bold, which sort of just emphasizes it a little bit. We'll just show a comparison here. So you can see, well, actually, I'll make this purple too, so that yeah, so you can see the difference here. Purple is a lot less highlighted, and then this feels like it's standing out a little bit more. That's what bold means. You can also italicize, which turns it sideways a little bit, more for like footnotes and things like that. Something that you want to sort of stand out. Bold and italics is really about standing out from a regular sentence. That's kind of the big idea there. And then last but not least is strike through. Now this is something that there's a command for. It's Alt-Shift-5, so I just won't click the button and I'll do Alt-Shift-5 and it strikes through for me. But you can also unstrike through that way too. I find it easier usually to just click the button because it's right there in front of me, and Alt-Shift+5 is a very weird combination that you're not really going to remember most of the time. But striking through just puts a line through it, so maybe it's an idea that you think is really good, and it's maybe not so good right this second, so you want to put a strike through through it, and then you'll come back to it later maybe, or you came up with a really good idea and your boss doesn't like it, but you want to leave it on the document, so you just put a strike through, and then if your boss comes back to it and they suddenly like it, I don't know why my keyboard keeps changing to German. We're just going back to that. So that's kind of strike through. It's pretty cool. I've used it a few times in the later videos when I get into some real doc examples, and I'll go over some examples of how I've done certain things. You'll see that strike through comes into play a few times. It's not the most important tool, but it can be a really cool tool. So that's strike through. Oh, okay. So I did want to talk about alignment. Now, I don't really have a paragraph, so let's just like type a bunch of random letters. Right, a bunch of random letters, and we'll do it over here too. So you notice that these are all centered from E5 and E6. Both of these sentences and quotations are centered in E5 and E6. So this is what we call left align, and you'll see up here that it's aligned. It's horizontally aligned to the left. The lines start from the left and move to the right, just like how it would if you were writing in North America, at least. I'm not sure if that's the case for other areas of the world, but that's what we call left align. You can also center align, which we will show here. This is center align. So now, since I highlighted E5 and E6, it's aligning that to be the center of those sentences, and then it moves from the center outwards. So we can just delete this real quick, and then we can say like, you really love to use Google Sheets, don't you? So you see how it moved from E5 outwards. You can see now that it's in D5 and F5. That's what we call center align. And then we'll just highlight the same cells, and we'll do right align. And it's the same as the left align, just opposite. So now E5 and E6 are the ends of the sentences rather than the beginning, which unfortunately in this case puts our sentence in E6 off the edge of the document, but that's perfectly fine. We don't really need to worry about that. Just was talking about alignment in general. Right align is not usually that helpful. For the most part, you're going to want to use left align or center align if you're living in North America. But I could see where it would come in handy. Most of the time, alignment is more important in things like an article, trying to work around other things, like maybe there's a picture in the middle and you have, let's say there's a picture in the middle here, and you've got some text going down this side, and you've got some text going down this side, and some text down here. That's kind of where you're going to want to work with that sort of thing. Next up, I wanted to talk about inserting images. So let's talk about that real quick. There's a whole insert function here where you can insert a bunch of different things, charts, links. I'll actually insert a chart here and show you how cool it is. Inserting a chart is really neat. There's no data. Usually inserting a chart requires you to have data, especially in Excel. It'll want some data, so we can actually just do that real quick. We'll have like 1, 2, 3, 7, 9, and then we'll just have the even numbers 4, 6, 8, 10. So we can highlight this, and then we'll go Insert Chart. And now you see it's counting up. It's made itself a chart based on the data that we input into Google Sheets. So it's kind of cool. It has no basis off of this. It's just the x-axis and the y-axis of the chart. And there's a bunch of other things you can do with charts. That's not really something that we need to cover because it's kind of irrelevant to the points that I want to be talking about in this. But you can insert images. And like I said in my initial video, I'm a big part of the Pokemon Draft League community, and a lot of the docs that I create and the docs that I help run usually use GIFs of the Pokemon to sort of stand out and make it look a little bit nice. So we'll go through that, choose an image to upload. So actually, I should go step by step here. So we're gonna want to highlight a cell where you want the image to show up. You're gonna go to Insert, Image, From here, you can actually go a lot of different ways. You can take a snapshot if you have if you're doing this off of your phone or if you're doing this off of a laptop, you can actually take the picture and insert it based on the camera. You can, if you have an image URL, you can just paste it in and it'll go right from there. You can take it from the photos off of, okay, the photos off of your, oh my God. Photos off of your computer, you can go from your drive, so you can go and find photos from your drive, and you can also go search. So you can actually Google search things here. So let's say Google. We want to search up Google, so we can take this image of Google, select it, and it'll insert it. Hello? There we go. It took a little sec there, and it'll actually insert the image of Google that we picked out. Now, that's not what we want to do because I want to use a Pokemon GIF as an example. Um, so I'm going to go from my own thing, which is uploading. You can drag the image in here. If you have multiple monitors like I do, that's kind of cool, but I'm going to just choose an image to upload, and we can go from here. Abomasnow is kind of boring. Let's choose something fun. I have a lot of these downloaded. I have a whole folder of them because I run a lot of these docs, and there's quite a few Pokemon to choose from. Let's choose something really fun to work with here. Wailord. We'll use Wailord. Wailord's nice and fun, and it's nice and big. So this is Wailord, and you can see the GIF. It moves and stuff just like normal. It takes the place of an image, though, in the fact that Google Sheets recognizes it as inserting an image. So it's moving and stuff. You can see that it's moving. Its tail's flopping up, its head's bobbing up and down, but you can move around the image as much as you want. Sorry, you have to be holding it to click and drag it. But you can also size images. So some of the fun that I've had with Wailord in the past is Wailord's a very large Pokemon if you know anything about Pokemon, and you can make it large so that it actually takes that, and you can just drag. Usually dragging from the sides is better, the corners, sorry, so that it doesn't fudge up the sizing of the actual image. And now we've got a massive Wailord, which describes really what a whale is. If you want to drag it from the side, it's going to sort of distort the image. You can see that it's stretching it rather than enlarging it. So we're kind of just going to want to keep it there. Now that we've got a Wailord on the screen, this is sort of the idea of images, and while it's this huge, you can actually see its movement a lot better. It's quite pixelated. I don't have the high definition sprite of this. This is a very low definition sprite, but it's fulfilling the same purpose. I did want to talk about inserting comments, so I'm actually just going to delete Wailord here. It's unfortunate for you, Wailord. Bye-bye, Wailord. Bye-bye. We'll talk about inserting comments. So inserting comments is something exclusive to Google Office, if you want to call that, or Google Drive with the different options that you can do there. So let's just comment on, you really love to use Google Sheets, don't you? There's a little option here called Insert Comment, Control-Alt-M. Again, the commit, like the actual buttons on the keyboard you're going to use aren't going to be that useful. You'll just see the icon, you'll want to click it. So you can insert the comment, and then there's me, Ian, and we'll say he loves Google Sheets. Comment. Whoops. Don't hit enter, actually hit comment. There you go. But now you can see the little corner there. You can see if you hover over it, you'll be able to see what the comment is, and you can click resolve if you think that it's resolved and the discussion's done with, which I will because it was kind of a waste. But that's really useful if you're editing a doc with someone else and you sort of have a question about what they're doing in that cell specifically, and you're going to want to insert the comment. So that's kind of what it does there. Now, just to finish this episode off, I have one last point that I want to talk about. We'll talk about adding sheets and duplicating sheets and stuff. You can see down here that we have one called Sheet 1. We can actually can we click the arrow? Does that work? Oh, you can click the arrow, which is probably helpful on a Mac, or you can right-click it if you're on a PC and you have a mouse. You can just right-click and you get the same thing. You'll get these options. Hiding the sheet is not an option unless you have more than one sheet because you need to have a sheet open. Viewing comments is very basic if there were actual comments. Deleting, again, we need to have more than one sheet. Move right, move left. That doesn't really come into effect super much. Protecting the sheet is a really advanced strat oh my goodness. An advanced tactic, advanced formatting that we'll get into possibly later. Changing the color is more of an intermediate thing, but you can change the color of what you want the sheet to be to sort of color code things. We'll just make it green. You'll see there on the bottom that it shows up as green now, so that doesn't really make a difference. But you can also rename it. So we'll rename it Beginners. There you go. So now Beginners is color coded. And we can actually just press the plus button here, and it'll add a second sheet. So now we have sheet 2, completely blank. It doesn't take any of our formatting from beginners and move it over. It's just completely blank. And I'll show you what duplicating it will do as well. So you can now, you see, you can do the hide sheet, you can delete, you can move right. Hiding the sheet just does this, hides it, sheet hidden, and now you can just go to your list here, little list of all sheets, and you can unhide it. And that's how you sort of deal with that. But we're going to duplicate this to see what it does. So we'll duplicate it, and it's called copy of beginners. There's a reason for that. You can always rename it and fool around with it as you want. But if, for say we had a lot of information on this page that we wanted to duplicate a few times, so we can duplicate it again, um, duplicate it again. So now we've got 4 different copies of it, but we wanted to change some things. So we'll just do A, S, MD. So we've added things, they're new now. We can duplicate this one as well, and then it's a copy of beginners too. And generally you want to rename this and stuff, but it's not really necessary for us to keep these around. I just needed one duplicate. Excuse me. Yeah, so we've got our duplicated sheet now. It's got the same information you'll see as beginners, does exactly the same in the same cells, with the same formatting because the words are both in, the sentences are both highlighted in purple. So that's kind of what adding sheets does and that sort of stuff. So you can either duplicate from an existing sheet, and if it has information that you really wanted on it, let's say, yeah, let's say you had, I don't know, some stock prices on one sheet, and you wanted to duplicate that to see the change in them the next day. So you would duplicate it, and then the next sheet you'd have would have them, and then you could edit from there, and you could work it out to see how that sort of works for the next day. Anyways, that's kind of what I wanted to cover here today. And this was formatting for beginners. Hope you guys enjoyed, and I will see you guys for the next episode.